Seclusion and restraints. Restraints and seclusion are an easy go-to for controlling unwanted behaviors, but is it ethical? People in a position of power, it can be teachers, aides, police, anyone, may not be trained to properly maintain order or how to handle misbehaviors. In some cases, when they realize the ease of restraining or putting someone in seclusion, they may abuse that power and continue doing so, putting the individual at risk. I witnessed one of my clients being put into a psych room and placed on a hospital bed while being restrained by wrist and ankle cuffs. She had a diagnosis of PTSD and mood disorder. She was scared and confused, which made restraining and then secluding her in a room much worse. She began to scream and her wrists were getting cut from trying to get out of them. I immediately went in to calm her down and finally convinced the nursing staff to take them off. She had gotten angry while at school and had difficulty calming down. A way this could have been avoided would be to properly train the staff at her behavioral school and to teach her the tools to calm herself down. Instead, she was taken to the psych room at the hospital, escalating her anger and starting her anxiety, where she had gotten cuts and a rash around her wrists from the restraints. In 2011, a mother filed a lawsuit against Palm Beach County School after a 10-year-old son was restrained against the floor by a teacher. The police had stated that the boy was restrained to the floor lacked humanity. The teacher was placed on probation for 1 year and in anger management courses. The child suffered from emotional trauma and had to repeat 3rd grade. The school had failed to ensure safety to her son and failed to address the situation until charges were pressed. In 2006, a 7-year-old girl was forced face down into the floor by 2 staff members for several minutes after gurgling her milk. She was fatally injured due to chest compression from being restrained to the floor, and she had died the next day. After further investigation, it was found that she had been restrained in the same manner more than once within that month by the staff members. The facility failed to provide accurate training to their staff members. They did not take her medical conditions and other diagnoses into consideration when placing her into a controlled hold. In 2008, a 13-year-old boy had committed suicide after continuously being placed in the seclusion room for timeout. The parents were unaware of this room and how inhumane it was. The room was similar to a prison cell. The boy was given a cord by the teacher to hold his pants up, then he decided to hang himself. These rooms are used in several special education schools, but are now being removed in several schools due to the harm it causes physically, emotionally, and mentally. Public Law 106-310, Children's Health Act of 2000, states federal department or agency shall protect and promote the rights of each resident of the facility, including the right to be free from physical or mental abuse, corporal punishment, and any restraints or involuntary seclusions imposed for purposes of discipline or convenience. The BACB Code of Conduct states, least restrictive procedures as behavior analysts review and appraise the restrictiveness of procedures and always recommend the least restrictive procedures likely to be effective. Several studies were conducted. Davidson, Hemingway, and Wysocki studied the reduction of restrictive procedures in a residential facility. Staff were told to reduce the use of physical restraint and seclusion on their patients and instead set up and use the policy and procedures placed. After 2.5 years, the use of physical restraint seclusion had decreased and displayed a correlation with low deaths, staff turnovers, and use of the restrictive procedures. Moore, Petty, and Moore studied the adverse effects of physical restraint. They discussed how most injuries upon patients and staffs were mainly caused during the process of using restraints and seclusion. They stated that there should always be at least 1-to-1 monitoring if the use of restraints and seclusion is absolutely necessary. Patients should never be left alone if needed to be restrained due to more intense struggling against being restrained and secluded. The client should not be placed in harm's way. Implications of the study included evaluating for pre-existing conditions, consider risk factors when restraints are used, and 1-to-1 observation is the standard when using restraints and seclusion. Kern, Vondran, Hilt, Ringdahl, Alderman, and Dunlap conducted a study on choice as an intervention to improve behavior. Choice making was implemented in 3 different areas, including vocational or domestic activities, academic activities, and leisure, recreational, or social activities. The study displayed that having the ability to make their own choices in these situations decreased behavioral disturbances and increased appropriate behavior. The purpose of this paper was to address concerns related to the use of restraints and seclusion as a go-to for control of other individuals that are displaying behavioral issues. By using seclusion and restraints, the individual is stripped of their dignity and can do more harm to them than other procedures would be if implemented. Staff are more inclined to use the procedures that gives immediate effects rather than try other options to calm someone down or discipline. Secluding or restraining an individual can cause emotional, physical, and behavioral issues in individuals and a long-term effect, but some staff members and caregivers do take that into consideration. The previous causes and history of using restraints and seclusion displayed that it is rarely appropriate to use and cause serious harm, even death, to the individual. The previous research and cases against restraints and seclusion procedures show that staff don't have proper training to be implementing the most restrictive procedure and need to be properly trained in the usage of alternative procedures as well as when to appropriately use restraints and seclusion. The paper discussed how many of these dangerous situations could have been prevented with proper training and the usage of least restrictive procedures to ensure the client is treated with dignity and no harm.